Welcome to the Dream Lab. My name is John Thomas, and we are going to go through another dream. This dream was also submitted on our tribe portal. This one was actually submitted by Mandy. So let's pull it up, and then we will take a look at the dream and talk about what it might mean. So this dream was dreamt in November of 2023. We're interpreting this, but April is when we're filming this particular episode. So about 5 months after the dream had been had, we're getting through the interpretation. So that just gives you a little bit of feel. One of the reasons why I've been mentioning in this series of Dream Labs when the dream was and when I'm interpreting it is sometimes that will give a reference to the dream. If a dream was from 10 years before, that might give us a little bit of understanding. Sometimes it's about a season that's already happened. Sometimes when a dream is, if we had a soul dream or something along those lines, and it's not in the same season that the dream had, it may not have the same impact or the same meaning because they might be in a different season. Maybe their heart has changed. Maybe they've been able to process some of the things that came out of that dream lab. So out of that dream, excuse me. So knowing when a dreamer had a dream can be helpful more for the application than the interpretation. The interpretation is not really going to change if it was 10 years ago or 10 days ago or 10 hours ago, but the application might change a little bit. So that's just one of the reasons why I'm mentioning that to you guys, and we'll get into our dream now. So Mandy wrote this. I was shopping at Costco, but at the checkout, all of our items had to pass through a roller machine that spit them out onto these long white pieces of wrapping paper. Again, this is something that is different than normal. So that's letting you know there's going to be something that's specific to the meaning of this for this dream. Whenever you notice something that's different than what it normally is in waking life, that's one of the clues of metaphor that is being communicated in the dream. So being spit out onto these long white pieces of wrapping paper, I then had to wrap my own stuff up. And what I was wrapping was all different kinds of meat. Chicken, ground beef, etc. There was a manager or a quality control person walking around. He was strict on how things got wrapped up. I felt the pressure to wrap it up really well. Then the dream switched. I was with my friend Jessica. We were driving and saw a minivan, but it was shaped kind of weird, like a 1980s minivan with a pointed front and a pointed back. It kind of resembled a cargo trolley or a passenger gondola. So you're kind of picturing that shape in your head while I'm talking about that. It wasn't until we looked inside that we saw that there was a lot of really nice seating areas, and the driver's wheel was in one corner. We kept saying how we needed one of these because it had more room and it was something to release towards our future. And then we were in a store, like a gift store. We were looking around. The ceiling was lined with rolls of wrapping paper that were for sale. We considered getting some things, but we left the store with nothing. Next scene, the dream switched again. I'm driving and my dad. Now, in waking life, this person is actually her late husband. But in the dream, she kept referencing him as her dad. So again, that's something different than waking. So there's something very specific that's being communicated there. Was with me. So I was driving and my dad, actually my late husband, but in the dream, dad was with me, and we were talking about different trips that he had planned. He was going to New York, and we decided that I'd go with him, and he said that that was good. I remember telling him I was glad that he was there, but I was afraid that the Lord was just going to take him again. I sensed that he was frustrated with me being in my emotions and not focused on the work. That's the end of the dream. Okay, so we've got 3 scenes to this dream. So for those of you that are diagramming this, you have a couple different options, 2 different options that might make it easier. One, you can just choose to put the dreamer in the center as the focus. Now I just told you what the focus is, but we'll give you that one sheet. You put the focus in the center, but then you're going to put each of the scenes in their own section. But you want to keep the scenes separated in their own section. You don't want to mix up something from the first scene with something from the last scene or the second scene, because there's a reason why they were separated in the dream. Now, if it's easier for you, what you can do is actually do a different diagram for each of the scenes. So completely up to you, whichever one that you find it easier. Let's walk through the dream one more time, and then I'll give you a little bit of instructions before we pause the video. So in this dream, it starts out that the dreamer is shopping at Costco. They're getting all of their stuff, but as they're checking out, they're taking all their stuff, it's got to go through these like rollers, and it spits out on the other side, and it spits out onto this white wrapping paper, and then they have to wrap it themselves. And there's somebody there that's just watching over, making sure that it's done right. And the dreamer is very, very careful to do it right. What it is that they were purchasing that's coming out on the other side is different kinds of meat. There was chicken, there's ground beef, other types of meat that's getting wrapped up, and the dreamer is really careful to make sure that she wraps it up well in this white wrapping paper. Second dream, she's with her friend Jessica, and her friend Jessica are driving, and they see this minivan. And the minivan reminds them of something out of the 1980s. It's got this rounded front, it's got this rounded back, kind of more like a trolley or like a passenger gondola. And they're seeing it, and then they look inside and they notice there's this great seating that's inside, and the driver's wheel is off to one side of it, and they're thinking, wow, this is really nice. Like, we need one of these. We need one of these for our future. So 1980s van that they need for their future, and they're talking about that. And then the next thing, they're inside of this gift store, and they're looking around, and there's all of these wrapping papers around the top edge of the store. The ceiling was lined with them, but they never actually get anything in this gift store. Scene changes. Now they're with their dad, quote unquote. Not actually their dad, because in waking life, it was their late husband. So their husband that had passed away. But in the dream, it's their dad. So that's something that's really important for understanding. And in the dream, their dad, late husband, is talking about all these trips that he had planned. I want to do this, I want to do this. And he's planning on going on this one trip to New York. And the dreamer's like, well, I'm going to go with you. And they're like, oh, this is really good. Yeah, you should go with me. And as they're talking, the dreamer makes the comment that they're excited and they're really glad that they're back together, but they're concerned, they're scared that the Lord is going to take him again. And she feels that there's some kind of frustration going on, like you're getting into your emotions. Be focused on what is going on right now. Be focused on work. And that's where the dream ends. All right, lots of stuff going on in this dream. 3 different scenes. What you're going to do now, go ahead and pause this video. Once you paused it, come up. What would you title this dream? What would be a good title if you were going to give it a title? What would you give it? Now, for the dream, who or what is the focus of the dream? Now, I already gave you the clue, so you've got that piece already, but now you can start working through the sub-focuses. What are the sub-focuses? What are the details? What do each of them mean? Once you have that kind of sorted out, then write out an interpretation and say it out loud. It can be really helpful to hear it being said. And maybe you're by yourself and it kind of feels weird to say it out loud, but you'll recognize how it sounds in a way that you won't if you don't. Now, some of you are probably doing this as a small group and you're practicing this together, which is a great way to be using these videos. Share your interpretations with each other. Once you have your interpretation all set and you think you have an understanding, go ahead and start the video again, and I'll let you know what I got out of this dream, what the focus, what the sub-focus is, the details, and what the dream means. And then we'll talk a little bit about how the dreamer should respond to this dream. So when you're ready, start the video again, and we'll see you then. So welcome back to the lab. Did you get an opportunity to work through all three of those scenes? Put in the comments whether you did that on one diagram or whether you did the three different diagrams and diagrammed each scene separately. I like to do the single diagram. I just find it easy for me the way that I think. And so I put the focus in the center, and then I'll put all of the first scene in one section, the second scene in another section, and the third scene in another section. I kind of work around the diagram. I'm doing this backwards so you can see it. It actually generally goes this way as I'm working around the diagram to keep that progression of the different dreams. So this particular dream, what did you title this one? Three different scenes. Each of the three scenes could have had their own title. So I just call this Mandy's Journey because you've got Mandy's the dreamer. You've got three different scenes. Each of those scenes are very different. I don't see a clear connection between them for a plot line that makes sense with all of them other than there's movement. She's going from place to place and doing different things in the different places. So that's why I called this one Mandy's Journey. Love to know what you guys came up with titles. So let's start out with our focus. So who or what is the focus of this dream? It's gonna be the dreamer, because the dreamer is the one consistent element in all of these different scenes that are in this dream. So because the dreamer's clear through, that's going to be our focus. Now let's start out in the first scene. We've got Costco, we've got the meat, and we've got the wrapping paper. So our first scene, you could use all three of those as separate sub-focuses. Costco, you might be able to leave off because it's probably more of an important detail. If you leave that piece out, it's not so important. But what's really important is the fact that there is the meat and that there's the wrapping paper. Now, you have off the meat, you have the process. So they have to go through rollers. So as she's purchasing things, it goes through these rollers and gets spit out the other side. So afterwards we know that it's meat, but we will put that as meat as the focus. So the rollers would be part of that. Then the second piece is really the wrapping paper. So what do we know about the wrapping paper? It's white, that it needs to be wrapped well because of the manager or the supervisor. So you could have put the manager and the supervisor as a detail off of that white wrapping paper. That's how I did it. It seemed to make the most sense. The fact that it was white and the fact that she was very careful to wrap it well. Those are your major focus. Now, major elements. Now, what I'm going to do, let's interpret that scene, and then we're going to move to the next scene. We'll diagram the next scene, and then diagram the next scene, because there will be some pieces, and then we'll put it all together at the end. So, Costco. What would Costco represent? Costco is a place where it's a warehouse. So there's a lot of things. And it was originally started as a way where small businesses could be able to get things for their small business. So it's a supply, it's a wholesale supply. So it's supplying people with larger amounts of things. What is being supplied? Meat. What would meat represent? Meat would represent some type of spiritual food, some type of spiritual nourishment, probably biblical doctrine, something that's being communicated, something that's being taught. And so this Costco is this place where a lot of people are getting equipped. So it's probably representing a ministry or maybe a larger church where there's a lot of things that are going on there. And this person has a particular role where they have received from this and it's being processed. It's going through a process. So the things that they've learned, the things that they've received, that they've purchased, that they've now have ownership of, these doctrines, these teaching, it's going through a process, but it needs to be presented in a particular way. And so there's actually, in that environment, there's someone that's watching how things are presented to make sure that, one, I mean, they're not making sure that it's meat. That's just there. That's just assumed. It's not that they're not. We can't say that they're watching that it's meat, because that's not in the dream. They're watching how it gets wrapped up. And so the dreamer has received some things, they've received some meat, they've received some clear teachings, and they're very careful with how it's presented, how it's put together in such a way that it can be carried out of that environment. So you're checking out, which means you're getting ready to leave. So you're preparing it to take out. So that's the first scene. The second scene, she's with her friend Jessica. Jessica, you could have as a detail, probably more than a subfocus, because again, if you leave Jessica out of the plot, it doesn't really change the plot a whole bunch. Important, so an important detail, but not necessarily a subfocus. There's really two subfocuses in this section. The first one is the 80s van. So you could put 80s as a detail off of the van, or you could just write 80s van. Personally, I put 80s van just as a little bit simpler. And the less things on the diagram, the easier it is to simplify what it is that's being communicated in the dream. So you've got 80s van, and then the next subfocus is the gift store that they go into. So let's look at the details of this 80s van. It has the rounded front and rounded back, right? It has this kind of weird look, more like a trolley or a passenger gondola, she said. So it's a unique shape. So you could put unique shape. You could put rounded front, rounded back. But what was really attractive is when they looked, they noticed how much seating it had. It was really nice. It looked old and dated on the outside, but the inside was good. The inside was comfortable. The inside was great. There was a place for leadership, the driver's seat. There was a place for leadership, but there was plenty of room for people to engage and to get to where they're going. Now, an important piece about this in this dream, they're not purchasing it. They're not owning this. So we don't want to say that they have this. They're just seeing it and realizing that this would be beneficial for their future. So they're being given vision for what could be in the future, but it looks like something old. So that's that piece. Now, let's come down to the gift store. You almost could make this 4 scenes rather than 3 scenes, because it almost like that's a separate scene. The only similarity is the fact that Jessica is still with her in this gift store. In the gift store, you see the gift wrapping all the way around the ceiling. So ceiling, your first detail, gift wrap. The second detail, ceiling. And the third detail that you're going to put off of this gift store is that they left with nothing. So you could just write nothing, and that would remind you, or didn't buy, something along those lines. Just remember, they didn't actually buy anything. So again, they're observing, but they're not actually taking it. So they're seeing something, but they're not actually engaged with it. And this particular thing, so what is a gift store? Well, it's a place where people get gifts. So this is talking about spiritual giftings. What's the ceiling, the wrapping in the ceiling? Now, again, we had wrapping earlier, and it was representing how things are presented. So they're seeing an environment where the leadership, the ceiling, is helping people to present their gifts well. Gift wrapping, it makes it look nicer, makes it look more attractive. That's the point of gift wrapping. And so they're presenting gifts in a presentable way, in an attractive way. But the dreamer's not receiving from this. They're recognizing it. They're seeing it. All right, that's your second scene. Third scene. This is where they're with their father in the dream. They know it's dad, but it's actually looks like their late husband. And the whole interaction about the trips that he had planned and the desire to go to New York. So you've got, as your sub-focus, you've got two sub-focuses. I'm going to put dad / husband. That would be the sub-focus. The next sub-focus is emotions. And that was the ending piece where the dreamer was, I'm just afraid God's going to take you from me again. Like that whole, so we'll write emotions there, and that will remind us of that piece. So off of the dad, we've got some details. We've got the trips. We've got New York together. So you could put New York together, or you could put New York as a detail and then together as another detail, but you're going to have to connect those in some way to recognize that the whole point was going together. And then the whole emotion piece of, is God going to take you? And then the feeling of disappointment and not being focused on what's there. Okay, so looking at this, the dad, the husband. Why is the dad looking like the husband, or the husband, like what is that connected? This is actually connected to the Lord. This person is actually the Lord. It's not about the late husband, and it's not about their dad. It's the father who is their spouse. So this is God that's being represented, and that God has some plans with the dreamer. But because of past hurts, the dreamer hasn't really, they have a fear that the plans that they make with the Lord are not going to be fulfilled, right? And they're feeling that there's something wrong with that this is not good. This is actually an emotional thing. This isn't a spiritual thing. And this is being brought to their attention because it's something that the Lord wants to heal, wants to deal with in their life. All right, so now let's put all three of those scenes together for our dreamer. Now, how did you put this together yourself? This is how I would do it. I start out. So we're talking to Mandy. Mandy's a dreamer. So Mandy, this dream it's a healing dream. You've been in an environment where you've received some really good teaching, and you've had an opportunity to grow and to learn the meat of the word. And you've actually learned how to present it well, that there's been a very high standard for how things are presented, how things are wrapped up. And that's something that you have that you can take with you into the next season. You've been given vision with your friends, so it's not just you alone, but you and your friends, you've been given vision with potential. There's some things, some ministry dynamics that you've recognized from a previous season that they look very different than anything else that you've seen. And on the outside, it's not so attractive. It kind of looks clunky. But it actually is beautiful because there's plenty of room for people to engage and plenty of room for leadership. And this has actually formed part of the vision in your heart for where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing in ministry. You've also been in places where you've seen spiritual gifts and the fact that the spiritual gifts have been made available to people in such a way that's very attractive and very presentable. But what's held you back in some ways is some of the past hurts and some of the past disappointments, especially the grief of having lost your husband and what that means to you. And the Father is letting you know that that's actually hindered a part of your heart that He wants to access, to dream with you about what you could be doing in the future. And he's bringing this up not to point the finger and tell you that he's disappointed in you in a negative way, but to bring this to your attention because he wants to bring healing to this part of your heart. And he wants you to dream and have vision for your future because you have something that's really good. It's been packaged well, and you know how to present it, and the potential is there. And it's time for you to start moving forward and begin to dream again. So, you see how this all comes together. All those different scenes, all those different pieces. There's almost like a past element, the Costco piece, and the vision. But where we're at right now is that last scene, and that's the invitation that the dreamer has. And so seeing how this all comes together, and then also recognizing how it's presented, because we know the nature of God. God's nature is redemptive in his way. He brings things up not to bring condemnation, but to bring conviction. So he is pointing out this is not good. This does need to change, but he's not doing it as I can't believe you would do this. He's doing this as an invitation. Here's the invitation. There's more that's available. Let's move. Let's find healing. Let's come together in this. Because the excitement was about the journey together to a new place, New York, new place that's a lot bigger than what you thought that it was. And that piece and recognizing that nature of God and how that's connected is important in the communication, because if you communicate a dream like this and you leave it in such a way that the dreamer is just feeling bad because of their past pain, that's not the intent in the heart of God. There's an invitation to move forward. So how you communicate it is really important, because how you communicate it needs to fit the heart and the intent of God. We talk about a number of different times. In the Art of Hearing God, we mention this. We touch on it in the Understanding Dreams and Visions. We talk about it in Practical Prophetic Training. We've written blogs on it. John Paul's taught on it. The 4 aspects of a prophetic word. There's the revelation. How did it come to you? There's the interpretation. What did it mean? There's the application. What are they supposed to do with it? And then the proclamation. How do you say it in such a way that the person hears the intent of God from the original revelation? All 4 of those needs to come together. With dream interpretation, the revelation's already done. They've already got the dream. Our place is to engage the Lord for his interpretation, figuring out what's the application, how do they say it, and then how do we say it? How do we communicate it to the dreamer in such a way that they get the intent of the heart of God? That's when you know that you've gotten to a good dream interpretation. So I hope that was a blessing. Mandy, I hope that's a blessing for you, but for the rest of you that are using this as a way to grow and learn about dream interpretation, I hope you got something out of this, and we will see you on our next Dream Lab episode. Bless you guys.